Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. I'm honored to have my guest. I'm going to let her introduce herself. So why don't you tell people who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name is Sibil Patri. I am CEO and founder of In Pursuit Collective. I'm rocking my shirt. And I just transitioned into that after 20 years of being in financial services in a very corporate environment. And I'm really looking to take everything that I've learned in corporate and my lived experiences of things that I have faced being a person of color in corporate and liberating myself and anyone else I can. And so I do that through coaching, through collaborating with people such as yourself and having these conversations, consulting and speaking engagements.
That's awesome. So full disclosure for those who are listening, I first kind of connected with you on LinkedIn, seeing your work, seeing, um, you know, the things that you spent time making sure you addressed and talked about and brought to light. And um, you know, there are many folks who, I'm going to use the word, who get involved with liberatory work, with justice work, honestly, because it's marketable
Mhm.
to some degree. And some folks who get involved with it because this is part of their story. Um, you had a a post recently where you were talking to your dad and you were talking about all the sacrifices that he had made, and how he might have been scared for where you are and how you're stepping into this new, um, purpose driven, heart filled driven piece of how you're moving forward with your business. So I would love for you to just dive into, if you would, kind of just background and how that leads you and positions you where you are even currently, because I think there's so much in that, and I would love to just kind of springboard from there.
Oh, yeah. That is a very complex story to tell, but I'm so glad you brought it up. Background is, my family comes from India, from a state called Kerala, and they immigrated back in the 70s and really came from poverty, from a village with no resources, no electricity. And so for them, this was an opportunity for a better life. Uh, Liberation didn't mean the same thing to them as it means to me. For them, the better life was through financial liberation. It wasn't even part of their vocabulary. It was just basic immigrant survival. And because of that, there were a lot of things that I learned and really had to unlearn and unpack about myself and know that two things can be true, multiple things can be true at once. We came to this country, I was born here, but I was discriminated against because of where I came from, because of my background, because of the color of my skin. But I also had a privilege because I was not a Black person in this country. And so many people don't want to talk about these things. And these are things that I'm unpacking now. And I've sort of unpacked for a little while now. But, that in between part of privilege. So as I moved through life and through corporate America, and as I got more successful, I'm thinking, okay, this is the wealth my parents wanted to achieve. And I was chasing that as the sign of success. Like, these are the sacrifices they made so I can get here. And I really wanted that validation from them. But what I didn't realize is how much the corporate and capitalist and colonialist environment that we were in was killing me.
Mm,
I didn't see it. I didn't learn it that way growing up. I didn't understand, like, even the anti-Blackness in the Indian community. I just understood, like, hey, we came here and we're making it and we're trying to strive to be the best and working hard and, good for us. But I got slammed with the truth. And with that came this unpacking and unraveling of what am I doing? What is success? What is actual liberation? And how does that play back into what my parents wanted for me? And it doesn't. It doesn't. I'm
Mm.
trying to create a new narrative for myself and the next generation. And I'm trying to break the cycles of what we had in the past. And they might understand that and they might not, but it's not for them to understand at this point.
Um, I think that so there is um, so much to that that I wanna talk about. Um, One is this piece of how there are many of us who kind of feel like the financial piece is a big piece to how we can leverage things, especially in the capitalistic society, right?
Yeah.
Um, and yet, I think that there are many who would attest that you can ascend that ladder and still not accomplish the kind of liberation that frees your soul, that frees your being, your thinking, your it. You can still be kind of locked into the same type of society that you're fighting against because of this financial piece or whatever have you. Can you kind of like unpack that a little bit with me? Like as you ascended and were successful, what were some of the things that came up for you that said like, and not that those things are wrong, right? Like financial freedom isn't wrong. And I'm not saying you need to be broke and fight this fight, right? Like that's not what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. But how do you balance those two and hold those things in tension and kind of what's that look like for you?
Yeah, like financial freedom is super important and we should not take that lightly. It's
Right.
absolutely essential. Um, but what I struggled with was that piece of it's actually almost entirely contradictory
Mm.
to have financial freedom in a corporate setting and seek collective liberation for all.
Mm.
And that took me, I think I knew it, to be honest. You know, we all make mistakes in our journeys. And I think one of mine is like, I kind of knew it a couple of years ago, but I was like, nah, but I really like the paycheck. And, oh, but I'm going to
Mm.
get all the way to the top and then I'm going to do some good. And there were people, there were students. And I remember just going to rooms filled with students that were looking at me and I was guiding them about careers and finance. And I was like, I want all of you to be in the rooms where these decisions are made. And all of that is still entirely true. But with the system, the way the system is now, you cannot fully be your authentic, liberated self and still succeed.
Mm.
You're playing a game. And I did play it. And for a while I played it and it was a coping mechanism for me of, okay, I go to work, I put on a suit, I am this person and that person gets treats. You know, it was like this validation of like, I show up like this, I do a presentation, I do a report, I do an assignment, I get bonuses, I get recognition. And so I said to myself, okay, so just erase all of the other things that make you yourself and just bring this person. That's who they want to see. And it was actually kind of fun. And it was my coping mechanism of dealing with like my own trauma.
Mm.
But when that finally started coming to a head was when I probably got the most prominence and most visibility in my career. And this had to have happened by design. I got my former firm's highest award for leadership in May 2020. They said, "You are doing such a phenomenal job. We are going to give you this award for the work that you do for DE&I efforts and for ESG, which are, you know, social driven, impact driven, social justice, like all of these initiatives." And I was the first woman of color to get that award in the firm's history. And I got promoted to VP that year, earlier that year. And so if anybody looked at me I look like, meritocracy at its finest. Like, look at this person working so hard, and like this brown woman. And I was on the cover of their annual report and all these things. But in May 2020, something else happened,
Mm,
something huge that impacted all of us, right? George Floyd was murdered. And that shook the country and it shook the world and it shook me. And I was in this spot where I had a platform that I didn't have before. I was a VP at this company and I just got an award for DE&I. And so I took it upon myself to relentlessly advocate for what was happening, for our company to talk about it, for groups to get together and try to heal and work on these things. And I actually tried to bring some form of liberation movement into the corporate space. They're not ready for it. The system isn't designed for that.
yeah. Yeah. And I think, to your point, I think any sector, you can make the choice to kind of mask those pieces of who you are while you ascend the ladder, and then maybe delayed liberation, if you will. After I get there, it's going to be all right. Um, you know, Folks listening might be like thrown off a little bit because it's like usually we have people who are in the field of education and they're like, well, wait, the person you have on now is doing work in the business sense, and she's consulting, and those are great things. What does it have to do with me? Um, my whole goal in having this conversation, and I think is needed, is the goal of education shouldn't be for learning to stop within the four walls. That learning should continue to take place, um, not just within those four walls, not just in the school, but it should impact the community that you're serving and ultimately the world.
Yeah.
That your experiences with In Pursuit Collective is it started as you continue to grow and learn and develop through your K to 12 experience and everything after that the seeds were planted even then.
Yeah.
And I would want our listeners to hear that and to expand our understanding of what education is, because schooling takes place K to 12, but education should be something that continues to happen even beyond, right?
Mhm.
And so that kind of leads me to this question for you. When you If you were to go back and talk to little Sybil going through K to 12, let's say you were guiding her, walking hand in hand and looking at certain experiences and talking about moments and saying, do you see that moment? That's why we do this now. Or you see this is what helped us moving forward. What are some of those key moments in your life that kind of stick out to you as you think about the work you're doing today?
Yeah, it is so important to talk about how this is all related, whatever sector you're in and whatever work you're doing. You can't be doing it at work and not doing it in your own community. You can't be doing it in your community and not bringing it to work. It is something that, if you really believe in what you're doing, it needs to be you 24/7.
Mm,
And that's why, I do bring a lot of what I do back into my local community and the schools. I have two children that are in a school system, and I think about this journey that I've had and the experiences that I've had and what can be different for them all the time. And
yeah.
so that is something that I relentlessly advocate for. Uh, and what I truly see as, certain flaws in our public school system and how these things might be addressed. And like we are going to talk about, what is the end goal?
Hmm.
What's our goal? Um, so I think that'll maybe we'll pause on that, but I'll talk a little bit about my K through 12 experience, which was really interesting. And it's something that I learned a lot from. So in the beginning, we lived in Queens, and I don't know how familiar you are with Queens.
I'm in
Um,
Jersey.
okay, yeah. So
So
Queens
yeah.
was actually so amazing. We were there until fifth grade, and I have a picture that I still keep near me of my second grade classroom because the coolest thing about Queens is that everyone was different, so that
Mm,
nobody really stood out for being different because everyone was
was
different and
different. Yeah.
everyone belonged. And so we had a black woman as our teacher, and we had all kinds of kids in the class. And I still remember that sense of deep belonging I felt there. It was,
Hmm.
I never felt that afterwards, really, for the rest of my life. To this day, I don't feel that belonging that I felt in Queens. And that's not to say that Queens is perfect, because we had
Yeah.
our issues there too. But then, we moved out of Queens, which was just so diverse, to Long Island, because as Indian immigrant parents, my parents were trying to make sure we were in a good school system. And so we
Yeah.
moved out to East Meadow, Long Island, and that's where I ended up going to junior high and high school. And I had a terrible experience there as being one of the only. There wasn't a lot of diversity there. There weren't a lot of Indian kids there. I just really, I had a hard time with, you know, either being bullied, not being accepted, being made fun of. I have stories of how I used to like eat my lunch in a bathroom stall and volunteer at the library because I had no friends. And I actually wrote about this. There was one day, like it was one of my first days of sixth grade, where I went to the cafeteria and I sat down. I didn't know anybody, and I just sat down at a table, and it was full of white kids, white girls. And the whole entire time I sat there, no one looked at me, no one talked to me, no one asked me my name. They all kind of just looked past me and talked over me as if I were invisible. And
Mm,
that's how it felt being there. And I sort of say, like, it's almost worse than being bullied. And I only say that because it's like, at least they acknowledge your existence when they're saying something to you. But when you're
yeah.
invisible, it's like, whoa, I'm really not here. And so that experience really shaped a lot of who I became.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the validation I was seeking from whiteness and the system, it was a lot of that had to do with that part of my schooling. And that's why I brought up the point of what is our goal?
Yeah.
Because you can say like a school system is ranked a certain way, and you have these ranking systems, and what are they ranking exactly? Because I could have stayed in Queens and I could have felt that sense of belonging, and I could have really thrived in that environment. But my parents thought, okay, but the schools aren't that great. So what did East Meadow offer me?
Yeah.
Because how good is that education if you're so afraid, if you're not really being seen or valued
Yeah.
for who you are?
Yeah. It is. It is almost the. It's almost fool's gold, right? Like it's shiny, it shimmers, but the substance isn't there, especially if I can't access it because of the barriers that exist in terms of whiteness and understanding black and brown folk, right? Like, even if you think about integration and the process of integration, like we're more segregated now in schools than we were when integration began.
Yeah,
Um, and that's by design.
yeah,
So, when you speak of both experiences, like it strikes a key even in a personal way, because like even now, I serve on a school board in my local, in my town. And my kids go to the schools. So I'm there and I hear, uh, reports because I'm on the school board. I get access to
mhm,
information that I wouldn't normally have. And so I hear about cases of um, bullying, interpersonal conflict, things that are said. I hear that they are racist in nature. And then I'm honestly scared for my kids that I've worked hard to provide access and resources that may not be available to them in other places, right? Because your zip code directly impacts what kind of educational experience you have. At the same time, there is a sense in which you have to wonder as a parent, what am I giving up in the process?
Yeah.
What does my child have to give up of themselves in order to be received here, in order to be heard here, in order to be seen, for you to sit at a table and for people to have conversations around you as though you do not exist. Um, I feel that in such a real way. I feel like I've not even feel. I know I've been in the same situation, and I'm talking about in school and beyond.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to just turn the page at all. But when I think about that, people can, oh my man, that's so bad. We got to work and do better. But how now? Like again, hand in hand with little Sybil, how now has that impacted you and the work you do um, at home, at In Pursuit, um, and just what you embody? How does that affect you?
Yeah, I think it's that sense of belonging that I continue to chase is still there for me. It's there for my kids. I want them to feel it, and I feel like as any person of color, you are always going to give up something
Mm,
when you're seeking something else. And yeah, it sucks and it doesn't feel fair. And I'm going through that struggle right now in a school system that isn't very diverse. And I ask myself, am I doing the same thing to my kids?
yeah.
And it shows up in so many different ways. It shows up in advocacy. And one of the things I do is I work with the school on our equity, well, the school district for equity and racial justice, and also with our elementary school. So my kids are in elementary. And I wholeheartedly believe that the process for kids to really understand what it means to be inclusive, it starts as young
Mhm.
as they can be. It is
Yeah.
not a conversation you wait for junior high. It is not a conversation by junior high. There's already bullying. There's already all the racism. All of that stuff is already happening, and so many kids aren't even reporting it
Yeah.
because it's not cool to. Or I feel like you need to get them when they're younger and really teach them what it means to be inclusive, how it feels to belong. And that work it's so challenging, right? I mean, this is the stuff that you do for a living, and it's so challenging because the system isn't designed for that. And so many administrators will say, oh, but it is. And oh, we have all these policies and we're doing all this rollout on belonging. And but it's not, and it still centers the comfort
Yeah.
of the majority that are in charge. And they're like, whoa, I'm not really sure, that's not really offensive, or they didn't mean it that way. And the one of the things, and I'll give you an example of the things that I'm struggling with right now with being one of the only, is that if something happens to a kid that is from a family that's the majority, you can sort of isolate that incident and make it about the individual. For us, if something happens, like my kid's picture was forgotten, or the name was forgotten, it's like you automatically assume, was that racist? And even if it wasn't, it's where a lot of people of color, not everybody, I guess, but a lot of us go there because that's how are we've been hurt, we've been harmed by the system. But
Yeah.
if you are a white administrator, that wouldn't even cross their minds. Like, of course I didn't forget Sally because you're brown. Like, of course not.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to get people to understand that harm that has already been done.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the work of Ijoma Alu, and she said in her book. So you want to talk about race? There was an analogy she gave, and in it she said that there was imagine a young lady kind of walking down the road, and she encounters somebody, and that person hits her in the arm, and she keeps walking. Somebody else hits her in the arm. She keeps going, and this repeats itself. At a certain point, the young lady is going to flinch before anybody has a chance to do anything because this has happened over and over and over again. In these yet to be United States of America, that's our story. We've we've been hit, and now you're mad at us for flinching before we get hit again. And for us, it's a matter of survival. It's a matter of protection. It's a matter of love for ourselves and for each other, and yet you don't recognize that this is a pattern of behavior that has happened over and over again, that is now embedded in policies, it's embedded in our business practices, it's embedded in our economy, it's embedded in our opportunity gaps that exist in so many different places. But yet and still you're going to be mad at me for flinching before you hit me. You know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you're describing. Yeah.
um which brings me to a larger point, and that is you had a an instance that happened with your advocacy in real life, in real time, where you pulled up on a school board to talk about some things that were going down and who was in the seat, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, Talk to me a little bit about that situation, and my hope is from that place we could talk about the connection of social justice in our schools and then in our lives, business, the work you do, and how it's all connected. So, talk to me about that situation.
Yeah, so I am involved. I don't go to all the school board meetings, but being somebody that is now a parent, I wasn't really involved in the local community. My parents weren't involved growing up. I don't think they even knew what a school board was. We just weren't educated. And once I realized that that is really like the big part of the system where all the decision making happens, where the policies happen, and I started tapping into, well, okay, these are the people that I need to know, like what is their background? And then I got involved in understanding school board elections. And then when the elections were happening, getting on email lists, and, this happened in real life where I saw an email from somebody that had just won a seat on the board talking to his kind of constituents about how he is going to try to make school about, school should be about learning and not about, trying to include all these different people because we all have differences. How are you going to account for all the differences? So kind of that rhetoric of, being anti DE and I. And I read it, and it was just so, it's still devastating. No matter how much it exists, you read an email like that that's in your community and it still crushes you. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what do I do? And so I went and I actually worked with a student advocate who is a transgender individual in the school system. We talked about this email. We talked about how can we get together and, speak up. And we actually wrote these statements kind of together. They had to be 3 minutes long. And so we revised each other's statements and then went ahead and read them. And, you know, it's hard. People look at me and probably you, and they think, oh, wow, they're not scared to talk about this stuff. I'm scared every day. I do it scared. I speak truth to power because that is now is the only option that I know for the world that I want to see. And so I went there and I read, like I have it here for reference, but I read and I was like, you could hear my voice quivering, but I said every last word, which was, you know, DE and I and the stuff that we do, which by the way, a lot of the things that a lot of schools are doing are just the bare minimum. Like we're putting up bulletin boards about Diwali and Juneteenth and stuff like that. And that only enhances the learning environment. it makes it complete. It's not taking away from math and reading and writing. It is giving students a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
It is showing students, especially in communities that don't have diversity, they're only going to see it on the bulletin board.
Yeah.
They're not going to see it anywhere else. And now you want to take that away from us too, because, we're not celebrating everyone. I mean, the whole point is there's so much already happening in the mainstream that, you know, media growing up, all I saw were white people on TV, white teachers, with the very few exceptions of black teachers and black shows, which I actually gravitated towards. So my point on this was very clear that this is work that is needed. It is the minimum you could do, and it needs to be done. And by the way, it's not just for my kids, it's for all of our kids.
Yeah.
And the point of that being, you know, it does benefit all of us. This work is not just for Black and Brown people, it is for white people too. It benefits you to see us, it benefits you for us and our kids to show up authentically. It benefits all of us, for all of us to have belonging.
Yeah.
And I read this book, Cast by Isabel Wilkerson.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's this one part about Satchel Paige, and long story short, it's about how segregation and being anti DEI really does hurt white people too. Like, if they allowed Satchel Paige, who was like an incredible athlete, to actually play in Major League Baseball, he would have helped teams that didn't win championships. And I mean, I'm paraphrasing something that was very beautifully written, but it's a great point to say, like, it would benefit all of us. And so why
Yeah.
isn't it being done?
Yeah. To your point, like, it's very easy, I think, for folks to overlook things like when I want to get my daughter um, products for her hair, there's literally an aisle one in the store that I can go to, or
Mhm.
when I want to get um, for my son's hair, there's an aisle. There's and it'll say it used to say ethnic hair care. It used to be that that's one aisle in both, if you go to Walmart or Target or wherever. And what people don't recognize is they don't have to tell you if something is for white people.
Yeah,
Like, that's the default.
that's
They
the
do
default.
have to tell you if something is for us because there's just, or they put the display out that makes it sound really nice and really wonderful at the, those certain moments in time, or certain months or things like that. But the other point that you made me think of is when we talk about, like, for example, the advocacy that you were doing with the local school board and speaking and trying to bring to light um, the need for DE&I. Folks who have the deepest problems with it um, feel a level of I have to protect or shield or our kids don't need to be learning X, Y, and Z. And the reality is the the earlier we work at creating communities of empathy and belonging and justice, prevent the issues that we are experiencing even now. Right? There's no diversity of thought. There's no challenging of ideas. There's no pushing each other forward. It is you either are this or that, and we're so divided upon amongst things because people don't have the ability to engage in real genuine pushing of each other's thoughts, ideas towards a better um you know tomorrow, a better today even, um which is the piece of social justice. So let me ask you this: in your work with In Pursuit and in your life, why, and let me say this before I do that. I To your point about, like, us doing it scared, like, I would love to not do this.
Yes.
I would love to not have to, through podcast, consulting, speaking, teaching, leading, have to work this hard and put myself on the line all the time for folks to get this right. I would love to not do this, but I have to, because I want the world to be better for my son and my daughter. I want the world to be better for your son and your daughter. I want the world to be better for our listeners, children. I want that. And so I have to work for it because I can't take this off. You can't take that. Like, we live this every day.
Yeah.
So the question then is, how, let me frame it this way. In your work, why is social justice such a key component of the work you do?
It is everything. What you just said is everything. I think about this, and this is sort of what I center a lot of my thoughts on. Imagine what we can be if oppression was not our battle. Imagine our collective strength when we are not at war with oppression. That is one of the opening lines I have on my website, and that is something that I wrote down and just sticks with me. And that is exactly what you just said, but stated a different way. What could we be doing instead right now?
Yeah.
Imagine that. We don't want to be doing this. They think we want to be doing this. We don't.
Yeah.
We'd rather be doing a lot of other things, but that's why I'm doing this work, and that's why it's all about social justice. I can climb that corporate ladder and I can make that money, and then try to fix a system from the inside. But this comes before anything.
Yeah.
Liberation is the goal. And yeah, I do want all of that other stuff, and I'm trying to figure out how things like wealth and everything intersects as I'm, pushing forward with this. But this isn't about me or you. This is about our descendants. It's about our kids. The work that we're doing is not even going to be realized in our lifetime. All I can do, and this has really helped me, is imagine, radical imagination. What do I want the world to look like? And that is what I based In Pursuit on. And that's what I based the values of this company on. Even though it's just a company of one, it's this. If I could rebuild society, because people always ask me oh, you're always complaining about the system. So what would you do? All you do is complain about it. And so this is the realization of, this is what I would do if we could start over. I'm going to imagine. That's all I can do. I can imagine, and I can try to co-create with people. And finally, I can also imagine that if the global majority gets together, if we really have this cross-racial solidarity happening, and I see so much of it happening these days, we're unstoppable. Yeah. We really are. How many of us are there? Yeah. How many of us have been colonized or enslaved or terrorized? It's just, there's so many, and there's so much inside of us, in our DNA, in our ancestral DNA. Yeah. And we just have to activate it. And mine just got activated, and it's not going anywhere. This is it for me.
I love it. I love it. For folks listening and tapping in and hearing your genius for the first time, how can folks connect with you and support the work you're doing?
Yeah, so my website is inpursuitcollective.com. I'm posting on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn is actually my main one, and it's at Sibil Patri for all three. And yeah, I'm excited. I have some projects I'm working on. I would love to continue to do stuff with education. As you can see, it is so important. It is a pivotal part of this work. For us to change the future starts with the kids today. And so there's more to come. I'm just getting started, and I'm evolving. So things will keep moving and changing, but the goal is always collective liberation.
Yeah. Yeah. For everybody listening, please support my sis Sybil. Support the work she's doing. tap into all the things that she's listed, and we'll make sure we put all that stuff in the show notes for folks as well. Thank you for spending this time, and thank you for the work you're doing. Excited for what's to come, and this won't be the last time we connect and collab for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.